What if by the year 2032, for every single year you age, science actually gives you back a year and a month? Like, what if you could literally outrun your own death?
I mean, it's a profound concept, right? The idea that aging isn't this fixed biological countdown anymore, but a curve that we can actively bend and eventually reverse.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome back, divers, to another session of Deep Dive Classroom. I'm so excited for this one. Today's lesson is a wild one, so grab your notebooks.
It really is. We are looking at a stack of sources that honestly read like a science fiction novel, but they're entirely based in our current rapidly shifting reality.
Right. And before we jump into decoding this massive convergence of AI and biology, just a quick reminder to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out the affiliate marketing links below. We've also got some brand new fourth wall merchandise in the store, so go grab a hoodie and support the classroom.
And definitely drop your suggestions for new topics in the comments. We love seeing what you guys want to explore next.
For sure. So our mission today is to figure out how soon radical life extension is actually arriving for you. We've got a fascinating mix of material. A WBUR interview with the legendary futurist Ray Kurzweil, the FDA's new clinical roadmaps on drug testing, the 2026 cardiology breakthroughs from Top Doctor magazine.
Plus those extensive clinical studies on plasma exchange and the American Medical Association's latest ethical debates. It's a massive stack of data to synthesize.
It really is.
But they all point toward the exact same paradigm shift. We're moving from a world where medicine just reacts to disease to one where technology actually engineers longevity from the ground up.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, starting with Ray Kurzweil's predictions feels like jumping straight into the deep end.
100%.
He's saying that by 2032, we'll reach what he calls longevity escape velocity. And I just have to push back right away. Are we really supposed to believe a guy who's predicting actual immortality in the next decade?
Well, skepticism is definitely the required first response here, but you really have to look at the methodology behind his track record. Okay, according to this comprehensive analysis of 147 predictions he's made since the 90s, Kurzweil actually has an 86% accuracy rate.
Wait, really? 86%.
Yeah, I mean, he predicted the fall of the Soviet Union based on the proliferation of decentralized communication tech like fax machines.
Wow.
He predicted a computer would beat the world chess champion by the year 2000, which, that happened when Deep Blue beat Kasparov in 1997. And he saw the explosive growth of wireless internet when there were only a fraction of users even online.
Sure, but predicting that a computer will play chess well or that Wi-Fi will get faster, that's vastly different than predicting we can cure human aging. I mean, one is silicon and code and the other is just wet, messy biology. Is that really an apples-to-apples comparison?
Kurzweil argues that it is, precisely because biology is fundamentally becoming an information technology. We sequence DNA like code now.
That's a good point.
Right. And his concept of longevity escape velocity, it's a mathematical equation based on exponential growth. So right now, as you go through a year of your life, you use up a year of your lifespan.
Right.
But scientific progress is advancing so quickly that currently you might be getting back about 4 months of life expectancy every year just due to medical advances.
So the gap is already closing.
Exactly. The gap is shrinking exponentially. By 2032, he calculates that the curve steepens so dramatically that for every year you live, science will extend your life expectancy by more than a year. The sands of the hourglass basically start flowing upward.
That is just, it's hard to wrap my head around.
And he predicts this all culminates in the singularity by 2045, where our minds actually merge with artificial intelligence.
Okay, so Kurzweil's math assumes we're going to get an absolute avalanche of new cures in the next 8 years. But, I mean, anyone who has ever paid attention to Big Pharma knows it takes 10 years and billions of dollars just to get a really basic, mundane drug through the FDA.
Oh, absolutely.
How does his math work if the regulatory speed limit is stuck in the 20th century?
Well, that bottleneck is the exact reason the recent shift at the FDA is so monumental. So for nearly a century since the 1938 Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the law mandated that new drugs had to be tested on animals before humans.
Right. The classic lab mice.
Exactly. But the data shows this system is incredibly flawed. Over 90% of drugs that are proven safe in animal studies end up failing in human clinical trials.
Wait, 90%? That is an abysmal failure rate.
It's a massive waste of time and capital. A drug could work perfectly in a mouse or a beagle, but because their biology is fundamentally different from ours, it fails completely, or worse, it becomes highly toxic when it hits a human system.
Okay, so how do we bypass a 90% failure rate without putting human trials at massive risk. We can't just guess.
This is where the FDA Modernization Act 2.0 comes in. It officially removed the statutory mandate for animal testing. And the FDA released a roadmap in April 2025, specifically targeting new approach methodologies, or names.
NMs. Got it. What does that actually look like in the lab?
We're talking about advanced in vitro systems, human tissue models, and really sophisticated AI-driven computer simulations.
So as a quick analogy for our divers listening, instead of using mice, we're basically creating miniature human crash test dummies, like digital twins to see how a drug crashes in our system.
Yes, it's exactly like a crash test dummy, but taking it a step further. Because these aren't just plastic models or digital code. Take organ-on-a-chip technology.
Okay.
These are microfluidic devices, usually about the size of a AA battery, and they're lined with actual living human cells.
Wait, living cells inside a microchip?
Yeah, they literally replicate the mechanical and physiological responses of entire human organs.
Explain this to me. How does a microchip, even with cells in it, tell us anything about a pulsing three-dimensional organ like my liver?
So the chips contain these tiny channels. Researchers push fluid and air through these channels to mimic blood flow and breathing. And because they use living human liver cells, the cells react to a new drug exactly how they would inside your body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Emulate's liver chip, for instance, has shown an 87% sensitivity for predicting drug-induced liver injury. Traditional animal tests only catch those toxicities about 50 to 70% of the time.
That is a huge jump in accuracy. But what about the systemic effect? Like, a drug might be fine for my liver, but absolutely destroy my kidneys.
That's the next step. Researchers are now linking these chips together into human-on-a-chip systems. Fluid flows from the liver chip directly into a kidney chip, then to a heart chip, simulating the entire human circulatory system.
That is wild.
And the timeline acceleration is staggering. The sources highlight a study from Hebrew University where they developed a human kidney-liver chip to test a toxicity therapy. They bypassed animal testing completely, filed an investigational new drug application, and reached human trials in just 8 months.
8 months instead of several years. And at a fraction of the cost. Cutting drug development budgets by 30 to 50% and reducing a 6-month primate toxicology study to a microfluidic simulation that takes days. That is the exact exponential acceleration Kurzweil's theories rely on.
Okay, the math actually starts to make sense when you remove that decade-long regulatory waiting room. But, speeding up drug development only matters if we actually live long enough to see these cures.
Right.
To reach Kurzweil's 2045 singularity, we have to survive the acute killers of today. And right now, the ticking clock for most of us isn't old age itself, it's the heart.
Cardiovascular disease remains the #1 killer globally. It claims nearly 950,000 lives in the U.S. and 1.7 million in the EU every single year.
Yeah, the stats are grim.
And Top Doctor Magazine's 2026 Innovations Report projects that by 2050, it could affect up to 45 million American adults. So if we don't fix the cardiovascular system, longevity escape velocity is a moot point for millions of people.
Well, I'm looking at the breakthroughs from 2026, and they don't look like gradual improvements. They look like a total structural overhaul of how we treat the heart. Let's talk about CRISPR.
Let's do it.
There's a phase 1 trial for a gene editing therapy called CTX310. It targets a specific gene in the liver, and with just a single intravenous infusion, it reduced LDL, the bad cholesterol, by about 50%.
Yep.
How does snipping a gene in my liver change the cholesterol floating in my arteries?
So your liver produces a specific protein that essentially degrades your body's LDL receptors. When those receptors are degraded, your body can't clear the bad cholesterol out of your blood, and that leads to arterial plaque.
Okay, makes sense.
This CRISPR therapy acts like a pair of microscopic scissors. It enters the liver cells and snips out the instruction manual for that specific protein. Without that protein interfering, your liver creates an abundance of receptors and clears the bad cholesterol from your blood naturally and permanently.
I'm just hung up on the timeline here. We are talking about replacing a lifetime prescription of daily statin pills with all their side effects, with a single one-and-done software update for your liver.
That's a great analogy.
If that works on a mass scale, it completely collapses the business model of chronic care.
It changes the entire definition of chronic disease management. And the pharmacological interventions are evolving right alongside the genetic ones. You've heard of GLP-1 receptor agonists, right?
Oh yeah, Drugs like semaglutide, which obviously became famous for weight loss.
Right. Well, they are now emerging as first-line cardiovascular prevention agents. A massive study in Nature Medicine found semaglutide reduced the risk of stroke and heart attack by 18% compared to older diabetes medications.
Because it's not just making people eat less, right?
Mhm.
It's actually reducing systemic inflammation in the cardiovascular system.
Exactly. The mechanism goes way beyond weight loss. It improves endothelial function, which is the lining of your blood vessels, and it reduces the inflammatory markers that cause plaque to rupture. And we are layering artificial intelligence on top of this. The sources point to tools like cardio-KG.
Right, the AI wearables. So not just your smartwatch telling you your heart rate is high, but actual precision medicine. For the divers taking notes, this is a great application. Check the health data your current wearables are already tracking. It's getting so advanced.
It really is. A Mayo Clinic overview showed an AI screening tool using wearable data that identified patients at risk of left ventricular dysfunction 93% of the time.
93%. Just from a wearable.
Just from wearable data. But cardio-KG goes even deeper. It looks at massive biobanks of imaging data and maps biological pathways and gene disease links that are totally invisible to the human eye. It can identify the exact genetic targets that cause heart failure before the patient ever feels a single symptom.
So if we have CRISPR gene edits, GLP-1s reducing inflammation, and AI mapping our hearts, what is a guy like Ray Kurzweil doing today to survive long enough to reach that 2032 escape velocity? The sources note he is 77 years old right now. He can't afford to wait for a 10-year clinical trial to finish.
Kurzweil is highly proactive. He reportedly takes 70 to 80 supplement pills a day.
Wow, that's a meal in itself.
Yeah. He also uses an injectable drug called Repatha to drive his LDL cholesterol down to 10, which essentially stops the formation of arterial plaque dead in its tracks. But one of the most fascinating aspects of his regimen is therapeutic plasma exchange, or TPE.
PPE. I really want to spend some time on this because it sounds like getting an oil change for your blood.
That's exactly what it is.
Walk me through the mechanics of what this actually entails.
So TPE is an apheresis procedure. You are connected to a machine that continuously removes your blood, uses a centrifuge to separate the plasma, which is the liquid portion, and discards it. The machine then returns your red and white blood cells to your body along with a clean replacement fluid, which is typically sterile albumin and saline.
And the biological rationale for this comes from those bizarre mouse experiments,
Yeah.
right? The ones we always hear about where tech billionaires are trying to infuse young blood.
Yes, you're referring to the landmark parabiosis studies,
Yeah.
notably by researchers Irina and Michael Conboy. They surgically connected the circulatory system of an old mouse to a young mouse. Initially, the scientific community assumed there was a fountain of youth protein in the young blood that was rejuvenating the old mouse.
Which sparked a whole very creepy industry of people trying to buy young blood transfusions.
Exactly. But the Conboys later proved that entire narrative was flawed. It wasn't that young blood was magically adding life. It was that old blood was filled with pro-aging factors.
So interesting.
Yeah. As we age, our plasma accumulates inflammatory cytokines, autoantibodies, and cellular waste. In 2020, they demonstrated that simply removing half of an old mouse's plasma and replacing it with neutral saline and albumin produced the exact same rejuvenating effects as the young blood.
Wait, pause for a second. The sources mention it removes cellular senescence markers and amyloid peptides.
Yep.
Give me the translation on those. Are senescence markers those zombie cells we hear about? The ones that stop dividing but refuse to die and just cause inflammation everywhere?
That is a perfectly accurate description. Senescent cells secrete this toxic cocktail of inflammatory signals into the blood. And amyloid peptides are the misfolded proteins associated with the plaques found in Alzheimer's disease. TPE works by subtraction, not addition. You are simply diluting the toxic garbage that accumulates in our blood as we age.
So it really is like draining dirty water from a fish tank. You aren't adding magic fish food. You were just cleaning the tank so the organs can suddenly thrive again.
Yes, exactly.
Is there human data backing this up?
Definitely. A trial by the Buck Institute showed that older adults undergoing a course of TPE had a significant decrease in their epigenetic age, literally turning back their biological DNA clocks by 1 to 3 years.
That's amazing.
But the most remarkable data comes from the Ambier trial for Alzheimer's disease.
How does washing the blood help a brain disease?
It's based on the sink hypothesis. By washing away the circulating amyloid peptides in the blood, the body tries to rebalance itself. It creates a concentration gradient that essentially pulls the toxic amyloid out of the brain and into the bloodstream, where the TPE machine removes it.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The MBAIR trial used plasma exchange on patients with mild to moderate Alzheimer's over 14 months, and it stabilized cognitive decline in 67% of the moderate stage patients.
That is unbelievable. They halted the progression of Alzheimer's just by filtering the blood. But here's the catch for our listeners. TPE is a very complex medical procedure. If you go to a private longevity clinic, it costs around $36,000 a year.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
So what if I just go down to my local blood bank and donate plasma for free? Am I getting a poor man's TPE? This feels like an amazing application for our divers to try out.
The science actually validates that approach entirely. Standard plasma donation is a milder, highly accessible version of plasma dilution. When you donate, you're removing about 600 to 800 milliliters of plasma. Your body then has to naturally regenerate that fluid volume over the next few days.
Okay.
And this process triggers a biological response called hormesis.
Hormesis. That is the concept where a mild stressor triggers a beneficial strengthening response in the body, right? Like how lifting weights tears muscle fibers so they rebuild stronger.
Precisely. By forcing your bone marrow and liver to synthesize fresh plasma proteins, you prompt cellular renewal. But the most striking evidence for the detoxifying effects of standard donation comes from a 2022 randomized trial involving Australian firefighters. Yeah. These individuals had high blood levels of PFAS, so-called forever chemicals, that bioaccumulate from fire retardant foam, and they're linked to various cancers and health risks.
Because forever, chemicals don't naturally break down in the body. So what happened when they donated plasma?
The firefighters who donated plasma every 6 weeks saw a 30% reduction in their serum PFAS concentrations over the course of a year.
A 30% drop. That's huge.
Because these chemicals bind tightly to plasma proteins. So when you physically remove the plasma, you physically remove the toxins. It is one of the only proven ways to lower forever chemicals in the human body.
So standard plasma donation is basically a free longevity hack. It reduces your toxic burden, prompts cellular renewal, and provides life-saving plasma for patients who need it. That is a massive win-win.
It really is.
But, it brings up a broader issue. We have FDA organ chips, speeding up cures, CRISPR heart updates, and literal blood washing for $36,000 a pop. This brings up a massive ethical collision.
Oh, absolutely.
If we are marching toward this technological escape velocity by 2032, who actually gets to ride the wave?
This was a central, heated focus at the American Medical Association's 2025 interim meeting. The core of the debate is whether the FDA should officially classify aging as a disease.
Because right now they don't.
Right. Currently, the FDA considers aging a natural, inevitable process. Because it's not a classified disease, it's incredibly difficult to get clinical funding or insurance coverage for drugs that target aging itself.
Because if it's not a disease, Blue Cross Blue Shield isn't going to pay for your anti-aging therapy.
Exactly.
But researchers are finding loopholes, right? Look at metformin, that dirt-cheap diabetes drug.
Yes. Researchers are running trials on metformin right now to see if it delays the onset of age-related diseases across the board. But they have to frame it as a preventative measure for multiple already approved conditions. The World Health Organization has already added a disease code for aging-associated decline. If the FDA changes its stance, it unlocks hundreds of billions in mainstream clinical research funding.
But the AMA report notes the deep societal divide this creates. Right now, because the FDA isn't fully funding aging as a disease, the void is being filled by ultra-wealthy individuals.
Yeah.
You have Jeff Bezos funding Altos Labs, and Larry Page funding Calico, pouring billions of private dollars into longevity research.
Right.
Are we heading toward a dystopia, like a world divided into the haves and the have-nots, where the haves live to 150 with pristine, CRISPR-edited blood, while the have-nots die at 65 from preventable heart attacks?
That is the primary fear exacerbating systemic inequality. However, the AMA report also highlights the utilitarian counterargument. Proponents of this private funding argue that almost all groundbreaking technology starts out incredibly expensive and exclusive.
Like the first cell phones.
Oh.
Or the sequencing of the human genome, which cost billions initially and now costs, what, a few $100s?
Exactly. The argument is that the initial extreme inequality is a necessary phase to fund the heavy lifting of research and development. The wealthy are essentially acting as early adopters, absorbing the massive costs and the clinical risks. Eventually, the technology scales, manufacturing prices drop, and the trickle-down effect could ultimately eradicate chronic disease for everyone globally.
It's the ultimate ethical tightrope. Is it acceptable to cure aging for a few billionaires today with the promise of curing it for the rest of humanity tomorrow?
Mm.
And if nobody dies, what happens to society? Does innovation stagnate when the old guard literally never leaves the stage?
Those are profound societal questions that our current regulatory frameworks are entirely unprepared for. What is undeniable, based on the data across these sources, is that the biological ceiling of the human lifespan, which was long thought to be fixed around 125 years, is facing a coordinated technological dismantling.
Okay, let's bring this all together for our takeaways.
Mhm.
We've journeyed from the FDA killing the 1938 animal testing mandate in favor of human-on-a-chip digital twins
Yep.
to the absolute revolution in cardiology, where CRISPR and GLP-1s are replacing daily statin pills. We unpacked how the underlying math of Ray Kurzweil's immortality predictions hinges on filtering the inflammatory garbage out of our blood.
Mhm.
And we waded into the ethical minefield of making death an optional disease.
The overarching takeaway from the literature is that the convergence of artificial intelligence and biotechnology is happening faster than human intuition can easily map. Exponential growth always looks flat until it suddenly goes vertical.
And for you listening, the key is that you don't have to wait until 2032 to start bending your own curve. Whether it's asking your doctor about an AI wearable monitor to track your cardiovascular health, having a conversation about GLP-1 therapies, or just rolling up your sleeve at the local blood bank to clear out your own forever chemicals, there are accessible, scientifically backed tools to improve your health span right now. Thanks for diving deep with us today in the classroom. Don't forget to practice what you learned, maybe go book that plasma donation, and share your reflections in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, use those affiliate links, and grab some fourth wall merch to support the show. We will see you in the next lesson. But before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought.
Yeah, to build on that, we started by discussing Kurzweil's prediction of longevity escape velocity by 2032. But his ultimate prediction is the singularity by 2045, a point where nanobots connect our neocortex directly to the cloud, backing up our memories and consciousness. If we do outrun our biological deaths and our minds merge seamlessly with artificial superintelligence when we finally achieve this immortality, will we still be entirely human? Or will the you that lives forever actually just be a digital replica of the person listening to this deep dive right now?